All of these things are going to have good and bad effects. And what we need to do is make sure that we end up in the future where the bad parts are minimized and where the good parts are maximized. I think no matter what we do, these things are going to be a net positive. But let's not just settle for a net positive. Let's make it a big positive. Let's really make sure that these things help the entire world, not just a piece of the world, but everyone. That would be my goal.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Weekly podcast. I'm joined here with the CTO and co-founder of Hedera Hashgraph, Leemon Baird. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, full disclosure, I have to tell the audience I've been an investor in Hedera Hashgraph since 2017, and so I'm super excited to have you on the show and to learn a little bit more about you and Hedera. What I'd like to do is maybe start with a couple questions about you, then dig into a little bit about Hedera, and then talk about some of the use cases that's currently being used for. And so kind of my first question is, I saw on your recent town hall that you've moved an average of once every 3 years in your life. And so I'd love to learn, what are some of your favorite places that you've lived, and how has that shaped your view of the world?
What a great question, especially the second one. That's fascinating. So I have moved just on average. I did not grow up with parents in the military. We just happened to move several times. I really liked Colorado Springs. I've lived there 3 times. I enjoyed Pittsburgh too. I've lived there twice. But I really, really liked Colorado Springs. I also like the Mojave Desert in California. I guess I like dry air, but probably my favorite place was there. Although I really like it here in Texas, in Dallas, in a Dallas suburb. I like this area too, which isn't very much like Colorado, but those are maybe my 2 favorites. But the truth is, I have really enjoyed everywhere I've lived. I have always enjoyed each place, not even just a little bit, but a lot. I really have liked all the different places I've been. And you asked, what is the effect on me of that?
Yeah, how has this shaped your view of the world?
It's an interesting question. So I perhaps have a broader view in some sense. You know, I grew up with a bunch of friends. My friends were from different parts of the country and different cultures in some sense. Maybe that helped. I didn't live overseas, so it's all very insular and it's all American. But different parts of America. And you know, America is a diverse country and there's a lot of diversity there. So I've maybe seen different types of styles of things. I've had different friends. I've had different social groups, different churches I go to, different everything, different schools that had different styles of how they do school. And then I left home and joined the Air Force, and that made me move every 3 years. And then when I finally left the Air Force, I've been doing a whole bunch of different things, starting lots of different companies. And for that, I keep moving. And so I think it's given me some maybe a broader aspect or a broader feeling. I don't feel a deep loyalty to any one location. I feel more loyal to the planet or loyal to humanity, more so than being tribal. Maybe I'm slightly less tribal than other people in that sense. I don't know.
That's a great answer, and goes with the ethos of the cryptocurrency community being totally global and for the people. I guess my next question is, given your background in mathematics and cryptography, how did that lead you into founding Hedera Hashgraph?
So I love math and computer science and cryptography and those things. And what I do in my free time is I work on math problems that I just think are fun. I also program in my free time. I've been doing that since I was a kid, but I've been doing math since I was a kid too, and algorithm invention and just other types of math too. I remember when I was 16, or maybe it was 15. I was very proud of myself. I was learning how to do assembly language on the TRS-80, which wouldn't even let you draw lines on the screen. And so I invented an algorithm to draw a line without having to do division. And it does modular addition. And I felt really happy with that. And later learned that, somebody else invented it and they have their name on it. But I was really happy about that as a kid. And I thought it was so cool I could draw a line with no division that I said, hey, can I draw circles with no division? I figured out how to do that. And then I figured, well, can I do sine waves and cosine waves with no division? I learned how to do that. If I kept going, I would have learned what Babbage's difference engine would have done, the difference engine approach, but I wasn't smart enough to figure that out. But just math problems like that have always grabbed me. I always find that interesting. Can you figure out ways of doing things? And then just pure math too. I had the best analysis of the trivials that has ever been done in the system in the history of conserved energy functions for cellular automata. Really, really fun math papers, like a 20-page proof. And to my knowledge, no one's ever used it for anything, but it's just really fun. Pure math with no application whatsoever. But what's really fun is when you can create something and then build a company around it and create something real out of the pure math thing. And so it's particularly fun if I happen to solve a math problem and then get to build a company around it and we get to change the world and that sort of thing. That's more fun.
Amazing, amazing. And I guess, building on to that question, one of the most important math problems that blockchains solve, and I use the term blockchain loosely because obviously Hedera is not a blockchain, it's a hash graph. But two of the most important consensus mechanisms, and blockchains solve the problem of consensus, but two of the most well-known consensus mechanisms would be proof of work, which is Bitcoin, and proof of stake, which has been implemented by many kind of third generation blockchains. But Hedera uses something different. Can you talk a little bit about the hash graph consensus mechanism and how that works?
Sure. So there's lots of ways people have done things. They've done proof of work, which has energy problems. They've done leader-based, which has DDoS problems and other problems. I'm doing something that's based on just creating a history of how we talk to each other. That's what the hash graph is, and working on that. Now, proof of stake is a term you give to any system that uses stake. So you could take any of those systems. You could take a leader-based system. You could take my system. You could take other systems and make them do your voting weighted by your stake. So we'd all be proof of stake. So Hedera is proof of stake. Lots of people are proof of stake. But we're a different kind of proof of stake. We're proof of stake built on a hash graph. And the idea is that you do the very simplest way to get the information out. You want to send out a transaction to everybody, you just gossip it. You just pick a random computer and tell them, and then they pick a random computer and tell them. There's nothing simpler than that. Every protocol uses that somewhere. Gossip is just the simplest way of doing it, and the fastest, and the most resilient, and the hardest for an attacker to attack. The real magic comes in, okay, once we get all these transactions, how do we put them in order? Because everybody will receive them in a different order. And what we do that's unusual is when we send you this message, we send 2 hashes along with it. These are cryptographic hashes. And I'm just telling you, when I tell you this message, I'm telling you the last message I received from somebody else, and I'm telling you the last message that I created. And that's it. Just 2 little hashes in my message. And the magic is that in the end, once you've collected this pile of messages, those 2 hashes act like the pegs on Lego, and you can connect them all to each other, and you can build up a complete history of how we have talked to each other. So I don't just learn all the transactions, I learn their provenance. I learn their history. I know how they got to me. I know this transaction went to these people, and then this person, and then it went over here, and then went over here, and there's going all these places in parallel, and then it reached me. I know the entire history of that transaction. And given that, you could do really good Byzantine agreement, asynchronous even. Stuff we've known how to do for 30 years, but takes forever because you have to send millions of messages back and forth to each other. Well, we can do it with 0 messages. Because everybody knows the whole history, we can run those algorithms purely in your head, just knowing how everybody else would vote if they were voting, so they don't have to vote. So that's a different way of doing things. It's gossiping. Those 2 hashes being really gossiping about the gossip itself. Very weirdly intertwined, gossip about gossip. And that then gives you virtual voting. So you get the voting for free. No messages going across the internet whatsoever. So gossip about gossip with virtual voting. That's how we do proof of stake. It's very different.
That's amazing. And given that you're doing things completely different, it allows you some pretty amazing characteristics on your algorithm. And so one of those things is scalability. Given that traditional blockchains are somewhere in the 10 to 100 transactions per second. Hedera can transact hundreds of thousands. And so what are some of the use cases that are possible on Hedera that wouldn't be possible on some of the other, slower blockchain algorithms?
Yeah, you can do real work on slow ledgers, but there's some things you can do on really fast ledgers that you need the speed for.
Mhm.
And so we're finding a lot of customers that are interested in this. We recently passed 1.2 billion transactions processed, more than any other ledger. We're the most used ledger now. We have people that are recording in real time to stop fraud. So like AdStacks records advertisements. When advertisers are putting ads on their website and then people are paying to see those ads, in real time, they're recording it. So they can't show different books to different people. They can't tell this advertiser, oh yeah, I've been showing your stuff all day, and then show say the other advertiser the same thing and lie, because everybody can see the total of what they're claiming. And if it's too much, then they know that they're lying. And it's useful to have that in real time. It's even more useful to have coupons in real time. You go into a store, you give them your coupon. You wouldn't believe it. It blew my mind how bad that industry is. They end up making trash bags full of paper ones that they then send to a country where labor is cheaper, and have humans laboriously go through all of those and record them. The poor store that's supposed to get reimbursed for this thing doesn't get reimbursed for months. And the fraud is just through the roof. You can make a Xerox of a coupon and use that, and nobody knows. Nobody knows it was spent twice. And what the Coupon Bureau is doing, this enormous organization for doing coupons, when you spend a coupon at the store, it probably is flowing through the Coupon Bureau. This enormous organization is building on Hedera now, sending through every coupon gets in through the system. And so it's permanently recorded, and it's recorded in real time, and it's recorded in a way that all the stores and all the coupon issuers can see, and they can verify that it's right. And by doing so, they can eliminate whole classes of fraud. And now when you spend your coupon, everybody knows about it instantly. You couldn't go to another store and spend it immediately. This is an application that needs enormous volume. The advertising application needs enormous volume. We have people that are tokenizing things, and we are just at the beginning as a species of knowing what to do with tokenizing. This will change everything. And for some applications, if your tokens are only worth $1 million each, you can go with a slow, expensive ledger, and that will be fine. But you might want to be doing tokens for things that are really cheap. We've heard of a giant museum that wants to tokenize every insect in their collection. And they want to be able to do this and be able to do transactions very fast. If you want to do this with consumers, you're going to have to be able to have very fast transactions. And so you're going to need 10,000 transactions a second, or tens of thousands of transactions a second. And that's what we're doing. Right now, we've lowered the speed down to just 10,000, and we'll raise that in the future to multiples of that. We have latency of just a few seconds to finality. Within a few seconds, you know for sure that your token transferred and you got paid for it. There is no question within just a few seconds. Total finality. And we have state proofs. Right now, we have the first version of state proofs that allows us to absolutely prove to anyone in the world that wants to run a mirror node that they're getting the truth, that they are getting the consensus, the true consensus of the ledger. And the next version of state proofs will make every consumer that just does a query on Hedera or even a query at a mirror node will get a cryptographic proof that what they're being told is true. And so again, not only do we have these immutable records, we have these signatures from the ledger itself proving that it's true. And so this is a big part of that. And so this is what you need. You need to be able to do state proofs. You need to be able to do high throughput transactions per second. You need to be able to have low latency. And if you have all of those, of course, you need low price as well. If you're paying $30 a transaction, it doesn't matter how many you do a second. You're not going to want to do very many. But we don't charge $30 a transaction. And some ledgers will charge tens of dollars for a transaction. We charge 1/100 of a cent to do a message like what AdStacks is doing, or 1/10 of a cent for token transfers. So you send $1 million token to someone. Do you pay 5% of $1 million? No, you pay 1/10 of a penny, a 1,000th of a US dollar. And so that's another thing that you really need. You need the low prices. High speed doesn't work if you can't afford to go to high speed. You have to have really low prices and really high speed. And then you can do some pretty amazing things.
That's amazing. And actually that brings me to my next question, because the other thing that we need now, and what has laid bare in the last few weeks, is you need something that doesn't take up absorbent amounts of energy. And this has come to bear, with the whole kind of Elon news and all the FUD around the Bitcoin's energy consumption. Hedera, to my knowledge, hardly uses any energy. So can you speak a little bit about, how Hedera works and how it can be such a low energy solution?
Sure. So if you compare to proof of work, a system like Hedera uses a lot less energy, because the whole point of proof of work is that you make it hard for people to cheat by one person pretending to be lots of people. And the way you make it hard to cheat is you force them to spend lots of electricity on a problem. So of course it uses a lot of electricity. With Hedera, it's inherently very low power. We're not forcing people to spend electricity to prove that they're real. We're doing proof of stake. It's also just incredibly efficient because, like I said, you have to send out each transaction on average once. You have to do that, otherwise people wouldn't know about it. And then you have to send 0 additional messages to get consensus. And it's kind of hard to get lower power than 0. 0 is a pretty low power. And so there was a published estimate recently that said that we are 1/5 millionth as much energy per transaction, which doesn't surprise me. And so, yes, we are green in the sense that we are very energy efficient and we are not using a lot of energy. But there's more to the story than just that. The other question is not just, can your ledger not destroy the world? The question is, can your ledger facilitate people who are saving the world? That's a second question. And Hedera has people building on it now to do fascinating things like trading carbon credits. You take carbon credits and you tokenize them. And now you can trade carbon credits. And again, it's only a tiny fraction of a cent to send somebody a carbon credit, which makes it easy to do the transactions and to have markets. And you have matching and clearing and settling in 4 seconds, which, in the real world takes a long time, which means that we can match people up and then we can have them transfer the carbon credit and then we can have them transfer the money and we can have it all settled. And there is no way that anyone can rip off someone else. It makes it very efficient. And so we have efficient markets for carbon credits. Not only that, we have people building on us markets for electricity. As we start having more solar panels on roofs and windmills in backyards, now, I'm not talking about the mega projects where you have thousands of square kilometers of solar panels. I'm talking about just having ordinary people putting solar panels on their house and windmills on their property. This is what we want to encourage. As you do this, the only way the economics works out, the way you encourage people to do it, is to allow them to sell the electricity back to the grid and to sell it to other people. And so you can have a market where people are buying and selling electricity to each other. And so you tokenize that, and people are building this on Hedera so that you have markets in electricity, in energy. And so you can buy and sell your kilowatt hour, and that can encourage you to put a solar panel on your roof. It helps it pay for itself. It disintermediates, it makes it more efficient. There's a lot of advantages here. If you are recording the energy usage of a house and energy production of a house and putting that with ledgers to do the trades. And then you have people doing on Hedera something you haven't seen before. Why not bundle a kilowatt hour of energy and a ton of carbon credit and bundle them together and trade these bundles? And so now you have these more complicated things that are actually a bundle of energy that produce CO2 and CO2 credit for reducing CO2 together. So they kind of cancel out in the single token, and you can trade these tokens. And so we have people building that on us too. And so I love this. This is the pattern of what ledgers do. First, they take existing markets and they make them more efficient. By making them more efficient, they get more people involved. They make people willing to do things they weren't willing to do before. And then you go beyond that and you make it so easy, you start getting markets in things that you never had markets in before. You're creating whole new kinds of parts of the economy that didn't exist before. And what's the result? Well, the result is that more people put solar panels on their roof or whatever. You end up with a world that's working more efficiently and things just end up working better because of that. And this is what ledgers do. And this is why tokenization is such a big deal, because all tokenization is taking the real world and putting it into a ledger. And that's not a big deal unless you start doing stuff with it in the ledger. And that's why you tokenize everything, because then you can do everything in the ledger and enable things that have never been possible before. Very exciting.
Very, very exciting. And speaking about tokenizing everything, I think one facet of the cryptocurrency ecosystem that doesn't get enough attention, but I think honestly might have one of the largest impacts on the world, is decentralized identity. And so I'd love to hear some of the things that Hedera is doing with decentralized identity. We in the developed world take identity for granted because we have our government-based, identity cards. But what about those people in the third world? What about those people in the developing world? That is a major piece for them to join the global economic system. And so if they don't have that, they need another alternative, a new rail, such as a blockchain. So what are the things that Hedera is doing in that space?
Yeah, it's funny. I just got off a phone call right before I called you. We're talking with you, talking about identity, about a really major identity company that's going to build an entire identity system on Hedera. Very exciting. And they were going to build it to open standards that were created by another giant company. I love this. We are seeing people build identity things on Hedera. Hedera is interested in this. In fact, Hedera was even part of one of these standards bodies that was creating standards for how you could do identity on a blockchain. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to contribute to the community and help the community to do these things. We're writing all sorts of open source software, examples of things you can build on AppNet using the consensus service. The way that we let you build a network, but its consensus is coming from Hedera. It's built on top of us. We have all sorts of standards for that. And we're talking a lot about identity. How would you do identity on such a network? Why does identity matter? In fact, what is identity? So identity is just being able to prove that you are you, and proving things about you. Maybe I want to prove to you that I have a COVID vaccine. This is a big deal. There are cruise ships now won't let you on unless you have a proof. Well, how do you prove it? A piece of paper? I guess. I'm not sure that's the best system in the world. And how do you prove that someone's not lying? And then how do you preserve privacy while you're doing these proofs? What if I want to prove to you that I'm vaccinated, but I don't want you to know my name or my age or my address? I don't want you to know who I am. I just want you to prove that the person walking in or the person buying this thing online had a COVID vaccine. That's all I want to prove to you. Actually, online, we really don't care. But walking into your restaurant, I just want to prove that I'm vaccinated, but I don't want to have to prove to you who I am. And so that's the second part of identity, is we need to be able to prove things to people. Maybe I want to prove to you that I'm over 21, because you have to be over 21 to do a lot of things. But I don't want to prove to you how old I am, because I'm really old. I just want to prove I'm over 21. So these sorts of things. Identity helps with that. And then you have people you're talking about in the third world. They have a number of problems. There's a number of problems in the developing countries, in the developing world, where people find it difficult to get access to bank accounts. Just very simple things. And without a bank account, how would you get internet access, which is actually a thing they care about, or cell phones, pay for your cell phones. How can you do this? How can you send money to a friend who lives in another city? And all sorts of community clever ways of doing it have sprung up, including using the cell phone where just one person in this city will call someone they know in another city and say, hey, give this money, like setting up their own Western Union. But it's just two people with a cell phone. These sorts of things are problems. What you need is a way for this identity to happen there too, and a way for them to hold value, to have the equivalent of a bank account. And so the tokenization and the identity are both needs, and the two are very much related as well. Sometimes when you're buying something, you need to prove something about what you are, that I'm over 21 or whatever. And so the identity and the ability to transfer value are tied together. And so this is a great need. I think that we are seeing ledgers right now doing a lot with tokens. And there's also a huge number of projects with identity. And as we see the two merging together, we're going to see even more. And so you talk about the developing world, I think it's a game changer there. You also, in the developed world, it's a game changer for slightly different reasons. As we're trying to make everything more efficient so that we can do new kinds of things we haven't done before, we need to take the friction out of everything. And identity is an enormous part of all those things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's it.
Speaking of game changers, one industry or one kind of facet of business that COVID really put a strain on is supply chains. And so, I want to ask you about two other niches, but the one is supply chain. So I know Hedera just signed a major deal with a country in the Middle East around supply chain. And so I'd love to just hear some of the things that Hedera is doing to help with a world with such a brittle supply chain at the moment.
Yeah. So NVC is a medical pharmaceutical supply chain company that's for the Kingdom of Bahrain, and then going beyond that to the whole world. They're building on Hedera. There are other people building on supply chain things for Hedera. There's a company working with the NHS in the UK to track whether your vaccine was cold at every step along the way. Because if it ever warmed up, maybe it won't work. Maybe you'll get a shot, it won't actually be protected. You wouldn't know. It'd be terrible. And if enough people have that, it's terrible for the society as well. It makes COVID spread faster. So they're attacking COVID by managing the supply chain and tracking it and using Hedera to do it. People are using Hedera for other supply chain things, just trying to prove provenance of things. You want to be able to prove provenance of your food to know where it came from, any of your pharmaceuticals, because you're not going to put that in my mouth unless I know where it came from. But even other things, cocoa or cobalt, you want to know that it wasn't produced by slave labor or by child labor. You want to know that it was ethically produced. All those things. Supply chain is a big part of it. And then there's supply chain, financial aspects of supply chain, and being able to borrow money against your accounts receivable and so on. All of that is possible once you've digitized it all and put it into a ledger. And people are pursuing all of these things on Hedera. And by putting these into Hedera, you get the efficiency of a ledger, and then you start allowing users to see things they couldn't see before. When I buy something at the store, I can't look up its history, but with ledgers, now you can do that, and Hedera is enabling that.
Beautiful. I have two more questions. The last one is, and you've already been extremely generous with your time. The one, niche of the cryptocurrency industry that's been exploding this year, undeniably, is NFTs. So I'd love to hear, some of the things that Hedera is exploring in the NFT space and some of the companies that are building, NFT-based products on Hedera.
Yes, NFTs are the future. So I keep talking about tokenization. Tokens, of course, can be fungible or non-fungible, two different kinds of tokens in the world. So if they're interchangeable, so maybe an ounce of gold is the same as another ounce of gold. There's no difference between different ounces of gold. So that's a fungible token. You could have a token for gold. But for almost everything else in the world, you have fungible, non-fungible tokens where they're all different. And so I had someone ask me today about collecting baseball cards. Yes, you can tokenize them, but each baseball card is different. It needs a different token. You need to be able to tell the difference, like a serial number on your token. Even dollar bills, we think of money as fungible. In your bank account, it's fungible, but a dollar bill has a serial number on it. So a paper dollar bill is actually non-fungible. Both kinds of tokens are incredibly important. This is why we rolled out our token service. And so you can build tokens on Hedera and transfer them to other people at the speed of the native layer. I mean, you can also do ERC-20s in a smart contract up at a higher layer, and that's slower, but you can do tokens at the native layer using the token service. And so you can transfer them incredibly fast for 1/10 of a cent. You can mint your own tokens. You can set up your rules. When you set it up, you can say there's an administrator and here's the keys, or you can say there is no administrator. No one can ever affect it. You can set up the rules the way you want to set up the rules when you create the tokens. Why do tokens matter? Tokens matter because to get all of these advantages of ledgers, we have to take the real world and bring it into ledgers. So we need to take real world money and turn it into tokens wrapped around that money. That would be a fungible token. We need to take real world stocks and bonds and real estate and gold and diamonds and turn them into tokens. Or we can tokenize other things, like imagine tokenizing paintings and fine art. We have DLA Piper on our council doing that very thing at this moment, and a bunch of other things too. And then you can buy and sell pieces of the painting. Now, I guess you can always do this kind of thing by just setting up a corporation and selling shares. Huge friction. Huge costs and slow and cumbersome and hard for people to verify. You bring it into a ledger and you can do everything fast and everything is efficient and everything is cheap. This is why you want to take things of value in the real world and bring them into the ledger. And then I've got to mention Galaxy. Spencer Dinwiddie, the basketball player, the guru in blockchain, he's both, kind of cool, started a company, Creators Galaxy. And this week I have a stage talk with him at Consensus, which is kind of fun. But he's allowing people to tokenize, turn into tokens on a ledger on Hedera, things you wouldn't think of. Like your own future income. If you wanted to, you could tokenize that and sell that. He's done that. Or if you're famous, not like me, but if you're famous, people might collect the very shoes you wear. You could tokenize your shoes. You could tokenize your time, and someone could buy the ability to just have a half hour with you and to talk with you and give you his ideas or just spend time with you. There's all sorts of things you can do that there's no markets for right now. You bring them into a ledger, you tokenize them, and he's doing this on Hedera, so we can tokenize them on Hedera, and now you can enable all new things that have never existed before. So I think tokenization on ledgers is really going to change the world. Every part of the economy will be affected by this, because ultimately everything of value, if it's of value, you want to be able to know for sure who owns it. You want to be able to transfer it fast. You want to be able to transfer it cheaply. You want to be able to transfer it between two strangers without having a third party that's trusted in between, where they can just do it and trust the other person to pay for it. You want an atomic swap of two things. All of those things can be done with ledgers. And that's where tokenization comes in. It makes the real world part of your ledger.
Amazing. You know, I hear you use the term, you know, tokenize everything and tokenize the world. And I guess the last question I'll leave you with is a little bit higher level, you know, philosophical. If you had one wish for the future, let's look 10 years into the future. If you had one wish, what would it be?
Okay, so as a mathematician, I want 3 more wishes, or maybe, or I want ultimate happiness for every human on the planet. These sorts of things is what I'd wish for.
Yeah.
So maybe I could narrow it down somewhat. What I would like to see are some of the revolutions that we're going through right now to do more good than harm. Mm-hmm. That's what I would like to see. So ledgers, blockchain, distributed ledger technology is going to change the world. There'll be both good and bad effects. I think that what we need to do is maximize the good and minimize the bad. And this is true of everything else. Artificial intelligence, I've been in that for a long time. All of these things are going to have good and bad effects. And what we need to do is make sure that we end up in the future where the bad parts are minimized and where the good parts are maximized. I think no matter what we do, these things are going to be a net positive. But let's not just settle for a net positive. Let's make it a big positive. Let's really make sure that these things help the entire world, not just a piece of the world, but everyone. That would be my goal.
What an amazing way to end the conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure. I know we've already gone over time. Thank you so much, Dr. Leemon Baird. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thanks a lot. It's been great talking with you. Thank you.